Hi there. It's November the 6th. We continue our journey through the book of the prophet Ezekiel, and we come to chapters 14, the balance of chapter 14 from verse 12, and we're reading through to chapter 16 and verse 41. Ezekiel's name in Hebrew, Hezkel, means the Lord will strengthen, and we find here Ezekiel is speaking into the situation of the coming judgment upon Jerusalem and Judah. In chapter 14 and verse 12 onward, there's a very interesting picture here, a very interesting word that God brings through Ezekiel. He says, if Noah and Daniel and Job were to be in this country that I'm about to judge, they would be saved for their own faithfulness. These three men, Noah, Daniel and Job, are held up as pictures of faithfulness to God. But God says they wouldn't be able to save anyone else. They wouldn't even be able to rescue their own family, because God's justice is so set against those who have sinned against him. He's really saying that people can only stand in their own faithfulness, and he will not allow them to cover other people. They won't be able to bring others away with them, even if if there's sword, or there's pestilence, or there's wild animals, or there's famine. All of these things Noah, Daniel and Job would not be able to rescue people from. It's a very interesting insight and picture. And then in chapter 15, which is a very short chapter, Ezekiel says that Jerusalem has become like the wood of the vine. So it's a wood that's not really useful for any handcraft, it's not useful for any carpentry work, and actually it's only useful for bearing fruit, but once it's finished, it's not good for anything. And so particularly it's not good when it's burned, but Jerusalem is going to become like a burned vine. This links back into those pictures of Israel as being a vine. If we remember back in Isaiah and in other places, the vine has been used as a picture of Israel, but here the vine is fruitless, the vine is not worth anything, and it's going to be burned up. So there's a terrible promise, here's a terrible outcome of this situation in Jerusalem. And then chapter 16 is a very powerful pictorial story that Ezekiel unfolds here as the Lord shows him. The Lord calls Ezekiel to call on Jerusalem to acknowledge her sins. He says that your parents were born, your parents were foreigners. They were not part of this nation, and I redeemed you. I called you. And he tells the story of a child who was found uncared for, a child found abandoned. It hadn't had its cord cut properly, and God saw it and redeemed it, washed it, cared for her, raised her, clothed her, gifted her with jewels. And this is really a picture, all of this picture is a picture of Israel's story, how God has cared for her, how God has raised her, how God has given her beautiful things, and also has crowned her with this ateret tiferet, they call it in Hebrew, beautiful word, ateret tiferet, a crown of splendor, a crown of beauty. She's seen wonderful days, but then she has gone and she has committed adultery. She's prostituted herself with anyone who is passing by, and particularly she has consorted with the Egyptians and with the Assyrians and with Babylon, and has worshipped their gods, their Gelulim, their dung heap gods, and given herself to them. And so the Lord says that because she's been willing to do this, and because she has prostituted herself, this bride who was to be the bride of God, this one God had called as his bride, raised, cared for, because of that she's going to suffer great damage. And those who have been her lovers are going to come, and they are going to break down all of her high places. They're going to break down her altars, and they're going to bring her to nothing, and they're going to end up burning her with fire. There is great judgment coming on Jerusalem and upon Judah because of her adultery, because of her behaving badly towards the one who has redeemed her and who has cared for her and has nurtured her and crowned her with splendor. It's a terrible fact that when Ezekiel brings these words to the people, they're not going to listen. Their hearts are hard, and they are going to just continue in their waywardness. They're going to continue with their idols. We are constantly being called to turn around. We're constantly being called to come home to the Lord. He is the place of our home. Other things will call us. Siren voices will call us. Other things will seek us out to tempt us to turn to them in place of the Lord. But the Lord is the one who has called us to himself, the one who has protected us, the one who has raised us, the one who has provided a Redeemer for us in Messiah Jesus. How much more then does he deserve all the love of our heart, and that we don't go after any other rivals to him. Have a very good November 6th.